experienced in their communities as it related to race and racism. And the thing was, in these sacred conversations, this was a time to actually take a risk and be willing to taste the bitter dregs of discomfort. Listen, I say all the time, even talking about race or racism or white supremacy, this is not your feel-good, fuzzy work. Nobody's gonna say, yahoo, let's talk about that. Nobody's gonna jump and be eager to look at the history of some of our congregations and for people to learn that places that they're sitting right now are the same spaces that denied entry to black people just a few decades ago. That's not your feel-good, fuzzy work. But in these kind of sacred conversations, people were taking their solid step to step out of their comfort zones, be willing to sit in the discomfort for the purpose of learning, the purpose of sharing, the purpose of seeking understanding, and the purpose of thinking and praying together to determine what might be some next best steps from here. We take a solid step when we recognize that doing nothing is not an option, just taking a safe step. It's not necessarily advisable to go all the way to the edge of the cliff or whatever that means for you, but be willing to muster the courage to say, we can't keep going down this road. We can't pretend that racism, white supremacy, Christian nationalism is just going to magically disappear if we keep trying to hope it away. You may recall, I think it was 2017, 19, it was pre-COVID, where at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, one of the top schools in the country, we watched people carrying tiki torches processing onto the campus at nighttime. This was happening in response to yet another killing and this sense of wanting to kind of take the country back motif. I remember watching that on the news, and my immediate response, it was nighttime. Well, obviously I said it was nighttime. I was watching it, and I was readying for bed, and I'm watching this on the news, and I immediately jump up out of my bed. And my response was, get the black students out of there. Get the black faculty out of there. This is a night ride. Well, why was that my response? Because it looked like one. Torches in the middle of the night, responding to the issue of white supremacy and race. It looked like one. And I'm pacing back and forth in the bedroom. I'm quiet screaming because the kids were asleep. It's late. And I'm going, give me my robe. We gotta get the black people out of there. I went to work the next day, the couple days after, and I told them, I said, listen, if they ever try to come on this campus with any of that kind of nonsense, it's being stopped at the gate. I kept saying, where's the president of UVA? She ought to be out there in her bathrobe saying, no, 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 we're not doing this here. But they did. And what it reminded us, friends, was thankfully, no, they didn't burn things down. They didn't burn down the black community in Charlottesville. They didn't do that. But what they did remind us of was that racism, white supremacy, has been passed down from generation to generation. These were young people. These were college-age kids. These were 20-something-year-old people. These were not people. How many times have we heard in our lifetimes, oh, as people die off and as these older ways die off, this will go away? No, it's not. And we've got to stand in this truth and take these solid steps to confront this and address it if we're going to be serious about creating a future filled with hope for us all. Another solid step. We think about individuals, but also as our institutions, whether that's our congregations, whether it's our schools. How do we take solid steps to seek to create a more just and equitable world? For me, one of the most pressing, and unfortunately there's so many pressing issues right now, but one of them that is concerning me and has been for so long is the continued presence of large numbers of guns and the proliferation of high-powered guns and the impact that that is having on our country. If we want to talk about American exceptionalism, then let's talk about the exceptional rate in which our citizens are being killed with firearms. And no, I'm not saying that it should not be legal for people to legally possess a handgun, a shotgun. That's not what I'm saying. But I am very clearly saying that under no circumstances do everyday citizens need high-powered weapons that are designed for the use in a war. Because there's a direct correlation between the rise in mass shootings and the lifting of the assault weapon ban, a direct correlation. But for me to take a solid step is not enough for me to just say, oh, I think this is a problem. How do I think about the relative amount of influence within the sphere of influence that I have? To try to say, what can we do to seek to create a society where we, adults, children, all of us, are much safer. And so here's what we did at Christian Theological Seminary. The president and I decided that because here in Indiana, that on July 1st, permitless carry was enacted into law. And what that means is anybody over the age of 18, no questions asked, can obtain firearms legally. We found a problem with that. The Fraternal Order of Police in this state found a problem with that. The list is long of people that find a problem with that law. And so we decided, okay, a month or so ago, what can we do? What can we do? We're just this little school over here, a few little people. What can we do? So we decided to pen a letter to the editor for the Indianapolis Star, which is the largest newspaper here in Indianapolis, and to appeal to the governor to repeal this law and to address all of the other laws that are making us less safe in this country as it relates to gun violence. But here's what we did that was different. In addition to drafting this letter, which I'll read to you just so you can hear it, we reached out to our denominational colleagues to say, hey, would you be interested in signing on to this letter that we're writing? And immediately, I mean, we had sent the letter to them by then, they said yes. Listen, friends, every major denominational leader in the state of Indiana signed this letter. We wanted to make it clear that while it's great when individual churches do things or local church clergy sign on things, that's important. But we wanted to send a clear message to the governor that this letter is signed by the Lutheran bishop, the Episcopal bishop, the United Methodist bishop. You get the point here? That this is what's being represented in this letter. Okay, so here it is, real quick. I know I'm running up on time. And it was published last Sunday in the Indianapolis Star. On March 21st, Governor Eric Holcomb signed House Bill 1296 into law, which eliminates Indiana's handgun permit requirement. On July 1, Indiana residents 18 years or older will not be required to obtain a permit to carry a gun in public. Law enforcement officials from the Fraternal Order of Police, the Police Chiefs Association, and County Prosecutors Association have all spoken out against the bill that eliminates Indiana's handgun permit requirement. And I go on to quote one of the police superintendents who says, "It's so easy to talk about your support for public safety, but if you choose to support this bill, you will not be supporting us. Police will not have the protection of the carry license procedure to help keep guns out of the hands of those who should not be carrying a concealed gun due to their violations of state or federal laws." Now, this reckless action takes effect during a time when gun violence continues to surge around the country. From mass shootings in schools, congregations, and grocery stores to the rising toll of gun violence in our streets and neighborhoods, including right here in Indianapolis, we have a moral and ethical obligation to protect the sanctity of life and enact laws that will curb this type of debilitating violence, not increase it. Indiana has not escaped the horrific effects of gun violence. At least 13 people were shot and 8 were killed during the mass shooting at the Indianapolis FedEx facility in April 2021. That same year, Indianapolis saw its highest homicide rate ever, with 271 killings, mostly committed with firearms. Further, in 2020, firearms surpassed car accidents and became the leading cause of death for children and teens. That's nationwide, by the way. Gun violence is a public health crisis that demands a corrective legislative response. We implore our elected officials to enact legislation that would keep our residents safer from gun violence rather than become more vulnerable. We put our children in harm's way when we ease sensible restrictions on access to guns. Assault weapons, which are designated to kill large numbers of people quickly, are legal here in Indiana. There are no limits on magazine capacity for these weapons of war. As leaders of mainline Christian denominations and Christian Theological Seminary, our faith in God and concern for humanity compels us to stand strongly against the relaxed laws that enable the rising gun violence in our country, state, and city. We all have a role to play in curbing gun violence: faith communities, businesses, families, and elected officials. However, we must begin with the unfettered access to these weapons that are wreaking havoc in our country. America has become an exception in the world in gun violence, a preventable disease that has metastasized into every facet of our shared lives. We call on Governor Holcomb to convene the special legislative session and address the rising tide of gun violence and repeal this bill. Additionally, we implore all of our U.S. congressional and Senate representatives to author or support federal legislation that will substantively address the national gun violence crisis. Now is the time to take action to correct the laws that enable the rising tide of gun violence. Tomorrow may be too late. This was published on Sunday, and on Monday. On the street that I would walk regularly when I was a graduate student at Garrett Seminary in Evanston, Illinois, and make our way to our favorite restaurant, the Walker Brothers Pancake House. In that area, someone decided to enact a mass shooting, killing 7, injuring dozens more physically, leaving a 2-year-old looking for his mommy and daddy. And we're still going about like there's nothing we can do. The purpose of my time today is to further invite, encourage, hopefully inspire you to take some solid steps. There's so many challenges we're facing today. Our humanity, who is human, is being contested. Who deserves the right to govern their own body is being contested. Who deserves the right to marry who they want is being contested, live where they want. All of this. The right to vote. Who deserves that right? Contested. I encourage you that if we're going to take serious the opportunity to stay in step with what we believe God is doing in the midst of all of this, that we might start taking solid steps. Yeah, recognizing it's a little scary. Yeah, it's taking us out of our comfort zone. Yeah, we're going to be called to take some risks. We're going to have to speak up and speak out and maybe even lose a few quote-unquote friends. But because you fundamentally believe that this is what God calls us to, that this is what God is up to, where there's hate, where there's destruction, where there's shootings and killings and discrimination and racism, that's not of God. But where there is love and where there is peace and where there is acceptance and where there is compassion and where there is kindness and where there is goodness and where there is helping each other and where there is empathy, I think that's a clue to where God is calling us to be. But we've got to make the decision that we're going to take a solid step. Band together with others that are doing or want to do similar kinds of things. I know we're in the middle of the summer, but the holidays are coming. We're going to be around the tables prayerfully at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and when Uncle Joe gets started saying stuff that you know isn't right, are you just going to say, I'm just going to eat my mashed potatoes, I'm not going to say anything? Are we going to be able to speak in love, even to our own family members and friends? The choice is ours. We're in a situation, you know this, but we also have an opportunity to stay in step with the Spirit, recognizing that all hope is not lost. That our children, our young people are looking to us. They're waiting for us to join what so many of them are already doing in helping to seek to create a future filled with hope. Let's take some solid steps to stay in step with the Spirit. Thank you.